Introducing in Hereford and Worcester
with Andrew Marston.
It's time for our On the Record series, where we catch up with the Worcester filmmaker Jim Lowe, who's been travelling all around Worcestershire, catching up with different people who are quite instrumental in the music scene. Now, it's not very often we hear from the parents and what it's like for them on this long journey. Well, this week we hear from Andy Maynard, who plays the father role, not only for his daughter Tina V, but to her band This Wicked Tongue as well. And he explains how Tina got singing in the first place.
As a teenager, she gravitated towards the nightclubs, and there's one in Worcester called Sing, and they had a competition called Worcester's Got Talent. Not quite sure, the first time she entered with a friend of hers called Clementina. They went out as a duo in that competition called Just Tina. And they just sang backing tracks, but they basically ran out of songs that they both knew. Her and her friends would go to Malia or somewhere like that for the summer and work in the bars, and she would sing on the beach, get a crowd around and have a great time and meet lots of people.
I know he needs me, he needs me.
Her A-levels would have pointed her in towards kind of university business management or accountancy, business studies, something like that. And about 4 years ago, around about the time of that competition, I was chatting with her. And I said, well, look, music's what you really like to do, that sort of thing. So I would say that one of the most important things, besides having the academic background, is to have a field of activity which you're in love with, and for lots of people, it becomes their career as well.
Well, Tina is now the front girl with This Wicked Tongue. We heard their set earlier on at the Witchwood Festival.
Noel Lewis, who organises Bridge Bash, saw her playing the piano and singing, and he said to her afterwards, if you can get a band together, I'll put you on the main stage at Bridge Bash.
And then the path was kind of laid for future gigs.
Open mics, the odd paid gig, were very rare. We bought a second-hand PA, wasn't a very good one. And even then, neither one of us knew how to get good sound out of a PA, so she might turn in a good performance in a pub, but the PA wasn't particularly good, and regulars could tell that the sound wasn't great, but I didn't know. A little bit of reverb, I didn't know that might help the sound. There was all a big learning curve. But yes, I would be driving her around. I'd get quite a few gigs, but as much as anything else, it was open mics. I don't think I really thought it was going to be a money spinner right from the start, and you don't need to speak to too many people to realise that money's not going to start pouring in. All my hope is she just reaches a point where she can make a living for the rest of her adult life in an area where she is comfortable.
What would you say to parents that are just starting out on this journey with their kids?
If they think they're going to be stars, then they're not being realistic. Any more than, say, the parents of a boy that's incredibly talented at football are being realistic that they think he's going to play for Manchester United or one of the big clubs. Because you only have to do the numbers. You only have to look around the open mics and the venues in a small county such as Worcestershire, go a bit further afield into Birmingham and so forth, to see the vast numbers of people that are playing the guitar, singing, writing their own songs, and then compare it with the number of people that get published and come to prominence. You divide one into the other, and that's your chance of success. I do think that band is very, very good, but I'm bound to, aren't I? But I say to them, I could find 200 bands like yours on the internet by tomorrow morning. And if I was a record executive, I could stack them up in order. I could evaluate them and say, well, this is the best, this is the second best, and this is the 200th best. And even if you were the best, right, and I was a record executive, I, as a record executive, could pick the 200th best, and in 3 years' time, by giving them TLC and attention, providing they have got the work ethic, and that's all important, they'll be more successful than you, who's at the top of the list.
I've been growing for so long.
So what keeps you going in those early stages?
It's fun, it's enjoyable, it's not costing you, it's not being done to the detriment of something else. You can be employed and live and work in the music industry without necessarily earning a fortune, but still be comfortable. It's still valid. that's your base camp, if you like. That's your default position. If you reach that stage, then you've succeeded. For me, I kind of look at it as partly as my social life. And the gigs she does are not huge distances. We do try and get expenses. So often you can get 20 or 30 pounds from a venue, which pays for your petrol to get there, and they'll give you a couple of drinks and maybe even a meal if they do meals. You've got to be reasonably commercial about it, and you've got to have a plan as well. Back in the early days, we used to sit down once in a while. We just used to make a list of things that she needed to try and accomplish. It could be putting a certain number of videos up on YouTube by a certain date. It could be getting a certain number of gigs and earning a certain number of money. You do have to write things down and then revisit them and see how you're performing in comparison with the plan that you had in the first place. That gives you some structure.
A full circle, what you give away comes back to you. A karmic wheel which forever rolls. What are you do?
We came up with this concept, the 6 R's.
The 6 R's,
The
right?
6 R's of rock and roll. One of them was recordings, reviews, not in any particular order, reviews whereby you try to get your music out to people that will speak favourably about it, but independently as well. Repertoire, if covers are important, then you need to learn them, but you need to be writing as well. Radio, trying to get the music out to the radio, so that means, for example, the BBC introducing is the fantastic first step in that respect. And raves. Raves is the 5th one. Raves isn't really a rave, but it's a gig, but it begins with R, but that means performance. And the last one, which is the most important, the 6th one, is readies. How much it's going to cost you and how much you're going to earn from it. They might feel that they only operated at 50%. And I've sat in the front of their band's minibus because I drive the bus. They think they've had a bad gig. And I say to them, look, it's good that you are your own worst critic. That's a great starting point, because there's no good coming off the stage thinking you've had a great gig and you haven't. When you think you've operated at 50%, you really probably operated at about 85 or 90%. And you're such a good band that your 85 or 90% is somebody else's 110% anyway. If each one of you puts in 10 hours of work in addition to the actual music work, in addition to playing, practicing and travelling to and from gigs, if each one of you can find 10 hours in a week, then if I chip in 10 hours as well, that's 50 hours, so that's 1 1/4 people. If you were to cost that, you've got a young graduate or A-level qualified person working in the back office of a London record label, probably their overhead, total wrapped up cost with national insurance and everything, is going to be close to £35,000 a year with a share of the rent and the manager's time and so forth. So 50 hours a week, you can easily see that is worth £50,000 a year. So every week you allowed to go by without spending that 10 hours, you've wasted £1,000.
He's a man who talks a lot of sense. We'll see the full video later this week.